I drove 9 hours in a snowstorm to surprise my husband. He wasn't alone. After driving 9 hours through a blizzard to surprise my husband on his birthday, I walked in with his favorite chocolate cake and heard him tell his brother, "God, I hope she crashes. I could use the insurance money." His brother Kevin replied, "Or at least a few months of peace and quiet." They both laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I left the cake on the granite countertop, and by sunrise the next morning, I was gone forever. My name is Caroline, and this is the story of how a snowstorm saved my life by showing me who my husband really was. We'd been married for 7 years, high school sweethearts from Maple Grove, Minnesota. College had pulled us to different states, but we found each other again at our friend Amanda's wedding in Milwaukee. It felt like destiny calling us back together, like all those romance movies promised it would be. Until it didn't. For the past 6 months, something had shifted in our marriage like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface. Marcus had grown distant, spending more evenings with his brother Kevin and their new crowd of friends, guys with expensive watches and weekend trips to Vegas. He started calling our cozy 3-bedroom home in Bloomington a starter house, rolling his eyes when I'd suggest painting the kitchen or planting flowers in the backyard we'd once planned together. The jokes started small. Comments about me getting a real job, even though my marketing position at Henderson & Associates brought in nearly as much as his accounting salary. Little digs about my weekend hobbies, how I wasted time playing that ridiculous farming game on my laptop or reading romance novels by the fireplace. I brushed it off as work stress, maybe midlife anxiety hitting early. Deep down though, I felt something precious slipping through my fingers like sand. Marcus's 32nd birthday fell on a Saturday in February. Minnesota winters are brutal, but this year felt especially unforgiving. When he announced he'd spend the weekend at Kevin's cabin in Duluth for a guy's getaway, I told him I'd stay home and catch up on quarterly reports. But secretly, I hatched a different plan. I took Friday off work, telling my boss I had food poisoning. I drove to Kowalski's Market and ordered Marcus's favorite German chocolate cake, the same one we'd shared on our first anniversary. I made dinner reservations at Romano's, that Italian place where he'd proposed 4 years ago. I even packed his navy suit, the one that made his eyes look impossibly blue, thinking maybe we'd have somewhere fancy to go. The weather reports warned against travel. Blizzard conditions, they said. Visibility near zero. Roads impassable. But love makes you do crazy things, and I thought surprising the man I'd loved since I was 17 would be worth risking everything. I had no idea how right I was about risking everything. I just didn't know what I'd lose wouldn't be my life. It would be my faith in the person I'd built that life around. The drive from Bloomington to Duluth typically takes 3 hours on a clear day. In a blizzard, it became a 9-hour odyssey through hell frozen over. I left at dawn Friday morning in my Honda Accord, trunk packed with overnight bags and that beautiful cake secured in a plastic carrier. By the time I reached Highway 35 North, snow was falling so thick I could barely see the taillights of the semi-truck ahead of me. The radio crackled with emergency broadcasts. Multiple accidents, cars abandoned in ditches, warnings to stay home. Smart people were probably curled up with hot chocolate, watching the storm from their windows. But I wasn't smart that day. I was in love. Or at least, I was in love with the memory of being in love. Every mile felt like a victory against nature itself. My knuckles went white gripping the steering wheel as 18-wheelers roared past, spraying snow and slush across my windshield. The heater worked overtime, but I could still feel the cold seeping through the windows. Twice I had to pull over when the wind nearly pushed my car into the median. Around Hinckley, I passed a jackknifed truck surrounded by flashing emergency lights. The driver was okay, standing with paramedics, but seeing twisted metal in the snow made my stomach lurch. I thought about turning around, going home, calling Marcus to confess my surprise had failed. Instead, I kept driving. I thought about our early days, when surprises meant everything. How he'd shown up at my dorm with coffee and donuts during finals week. How I'd driven 6 hours to his college just to watch him play in an intramural basketball game. We used to be the couple other people envied, finishing each other's sentences, laughing until our sides ached, planning adventures that felt possible because we were together. When had that changed? When had we stopped being teammates and started being, what? Roommates? Strangers sharing a mortgage? The snow kept falling. I kept driving. My phone buzzed with weather alerts. but I'd silenced Marcus's contact months ago after he'd started sending me articles about realistic career expectations and financial responsibility in marriage. The man who once loved my spontaneity now seemed determined to suffocate it under spreadsheets and 5-year plans. Somewhere near Sandstone, the storm intensified beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. I couldn't see road signs, couldn't tell where the highway ended and the ditch began. Other cars had disappeared, either pulled over to wait it out or already arrived at their destinations. I should have stopped. Should have found a motel, called Marcus, admitted defeat. But something stubborn kept my foot on the accelerator. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the last gasp of a woman fighting for her marriage. Or maybe it was fate, pushing me toward a truth that would set me free. The GPS estimated 2 hours remaining to Kevin's cabin. In that moment, driving through what felt like the end of the world, I couldn't imagine anything that would make the journey not worth it. I was about to discover exactly how wrong a person could be. Kevin's cabin sat at the end of Birchwood Lane, a winding dirt road that hadn't seen a snowplow in hours. My Honda struggled through drifts that reached the door handles, engine whining in protest. Pine trees bent under the weight of snow, creating a tunnel of white that made me feel like I was driving into a fairy tale. If only I'd known it would turn into a nightmare. I parked behind Marcus's black pickup truck, noting a second vehicle I didn't recognize, a red Jeep with Wisconsin plates. Kevin must have brought a friend. The more the merrier for my surprise, I thought, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. My brown hair was a mess from the stress of driving, and my cheeks were flushed from adrenaline and cold. But my eyes still sparkled with excitement. The cake had survived the journey perfectly. German chocolate with cream cheese frosting, "Happy Birthday Marcus," written in blue script across the top. I pulled my coat tight and stepped into ankle-deep snow, the cold hitting my face like tiny needles. The cabin glowed with warm light, smoke curling from the chimney into the gray sky. Through the front windows, I could see figures moving around inside. Marcus was here. Safe. Probably wondering why I hadn't answered his morning text asking about my day. The front door was unlocked, typical for Kevin's place, which felt like stepping back to a time when neighbors trusted each other. I pushed it open quietly, wanting to preserve the surprise as long as possible. The cake box crinkled softly in my hands as I stepped into the warmth. That's when I heard my name. Caroline texted around noon, Marcus was saying from the living room. Said she's buried in reports all weekend. Probably hasn't left her desk. My heart skipped. He sounded relieved. She's probably at home playing that stupid farming game she's obsessed with, Kevin replied. Building virtual barns while the real world happens around her. They laughed. Not cruel laughter, exactly, but dismissive. The kind of laugh you share about someone who isn't important enough to worry about offending. I should have announced myself then. Should have walked into the room with a bright smile and my beautiful cake, letting their surprise wash away whatever strange conversation I'd stumbled into. But something made me freeze in the entryway, snow melting from my boots onto the hardwood floor. Good thing she stayed home, Marcus continued. Last thing I need is her tagging along tomorrow, trying to turn my birthday into some sentimental Hallmark moment. You know how she gets with those hurt puppy dog eyes when I want guy time. My chest tightened. When had wanting to spend time with my husband become clingy? When had caring about his birthday become a burden? Weather's getting nasty out there anyway, Kevin said. Dave's wife got stuck for 5 hours yesterday trying to get home from Rochester. Roads are a complete disaster. That's when Marcus said the words that would replay in my mind for months afterward. Honestly? Part of me hopes she crashes on the way to work Monday. I could really use that insurance money. The cake box slipped from my numb fingers, but I caught it just before it hit the floor. Time stopped. The world narrowed to those words echoing in my ears. Part of me hopes she crashes. I could really use that insurance money. Kevin's response hit like a second punch to the gut. Or at least a few months of peace and quiet, right? No more nagging about painting the kitchen or planning date nights. They both laughed. Not nervous laughter or the uncomfortable chuckle of a bad joke gone too far. This was genuine amusement. My husband, the man I'd driven 9 hours through a blizzard to surprise, was genuinely entertained by the thought of my death. I must have made a sound. A sharp intake of breath, maybe, or the soft thud of my heart breaking. Because suddenly the laughter stopped. Did you hear something? Kevin's voice, cautious now. I didn't wait to find out what came next. Without thinking, I walked straight into the kitchen and placed the cake on the granite island. My movements felt robotic, disconnected from the chaos in my mind. The cake looked obscene sitting there, bright, cheerful, celebrating a man who just wished me dead for insurance money. Caroline. Marcus's voice behind me, sharp with panic. I turned to face him. He stood in the kitchen doorway, face white as the snow outside. Kevin hovered behind him, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? For 7 years, I'd been married to a stranger. The man standing before me wasn't the boy who'd held my hand during high school graduation, or the college student who'd written me letters when email felt too impersonal. This wasn't the man who'd cried when his father died, or who'd spent our entire savings on fertility treatments when we tried to have children. Or maybe it was. Maybe I'd been the stranger, living in a fantasy while he'd been planning my funeral. Caroline, I can explain, Marcus started. But I was already moving. Past him, past Kevin's guilty expression, past the cozy living room where they'd been laughing about my death. I grabbed my purse from where I'd dropped it by the door and walked straight back into the blizzard. Caroline, wait. Marcus called from the doorway. You don't understand. It was just. I didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around. Because if I looked at his face, I might see something that would make me doubt what I'd heard. And I couldn't afford to doubt. Not when my life, literally, might depend on believing what my own ears had told me. The car doors were frozen shut. I had to use my key to scrape ice from the handle, while Marcus's voice carried across the snow. It was just a joke. You're taking this completely wrong. A joke. My death was a joke to him. The engine turned over on the third try. Through the windshield, I could see Marcus standing in the snow without a coat, arms spread wide in a gesture of helpless frustration. Kevin had joined him, probably calculating how much trouble this would cause. My phone buzzed once, then again. Then it started ringing non-stop. I turned it off and drove back into the storm. The motel I found was called the Pine Rest Inn, a collection of small cabins just off Highway 35 near Sandstone. The kind of place truckers used when weather made driving impossible, with thin walls and thinner towels. But it was warm, and more importantly, it was anonymous. I paid cash for one night and sat on the scratchy bedspread, staring at my silent phone. 17 missed calls. The number kept climbing even with the phone turned off, notifications piling up like the snow outside my window. I didn't read the messages. Couldn't bear to see Marcus's explanations, his justifications for why hoping your wife crashes was somehow acceptable between brothers. Instead, I stared at the water stain on the ceiling and tried to piece together when my marriage had died. Was it when he'd started calling our house a starter home, like our life together was something to outgrow? When he'd begun treating my career like a hobby that might someday become serious? When he'd stopped asking about my day and started coming home later and later, claiming overtime that never appeared on his pay stubs? Or had it been dead longer? Had I been performing CPR on a corpse, desperately trying to revive something that had quietly suffocated under the weight of his indifference? The snow kept falling outside. I ordered pizza from a place that delivered even in blizzard conditions, bless those brave drivers, and tried to make sense of my life. 7 years of marriage. 13 years since we'd started dating. Half my adult life invested in a man who just told his brother that my death would be financially beneficial. That night, I made 3 decisions that would change everything. First, I was leaving Marcus. Not separating. Not taking a break. Leaving. Forever. Second, I was moving out immediately. No long conversations, no couples therapy, no giving him a chance to explain why I hope she crashes, was somehow taken out of context. Third, I was done explaining myself to someone who saw me as a life insurance payout waiting to happen. I slept fitfully, dreaming of snow and laughter and a cake sitting abandoned on a kitchen counter. When I woke at dawn, my phone showed 43 missed calls and 67 text messages. The storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline and beautiful under morning sunlight. I drove home to Bloomington in silence, my Honda the only car on roads that sparkled like scattered diamonds. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like driving to my own funeral, or maybe away from it. The house looked smaller when I pulled into our driveway. Had it always been this ordinary? This forgettable? Marcus's pickup wasn't there yet, which gave me the time I needed. I packed 3 suitcases with clothes, toiletries, and the few things that felt truly mine. My laptop, my books, the jewelry my grandmother had left me. Photos from before we were married, when I still looked happy in pictures. Important documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport. Then I did something that felt both crazy and completely rational. I took my car title, my banking information, and every piece of financial documentation I could find. Because a man who jokes about his wife's death for insurance money might not be trustworthy with joint assets. As I loaded my car, I realized I was humming. Actually humming. For the first time in months, I felt something that might have been hope. By Monday morning, I was living in a furnished apartment across town, sleeping on sheets that didn't smell like him and drinking coffee from a mug he'd never touched. I'd taken 3 personal days from work, claiming a family emergency. Which wasn't exactly a lie, my family was definitely having an emergency. My phone had been buzzing constantly since Saturday night. Marcus's messages evolved like the stages of grief, played out in real time across my screen. Saturday night, Caroline, please call me back. This is ridiculous. It was just guy talk. Sunday morning, I'm really worried about you. Where are you staying? Just let me know you're safe. Sunday afternoon, look, I'm sorry you heard that. But you're completely overreacting. People say stupid things sometimes. Sunday evening, this is insane. You're destroying our marriage over a bad joke. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? Monday morning brought a new tone. If you don't call me back by noon, I'm calling the police. This is harassment now. I almost laughed at that one. I was harassing him by not accepting his apology for hoping I'd die. The logic was stunning. But Monday afternoon brought the message that made my blood run cold. You're really going to ruin my birthday weekend over this? After everything I've done for you. Not once, not in dozens of messages, had he actually said he was sorry. Not for the words, not for the laughter, not for making me feel like a burden he wanted to escape. Everything was my fault for hearing it, my fault for caring, my fault for not understanding his sense of humor. That's when I started making phone calls of my own. First, I called our bank and moved half of our joint savings to a new account in my name only. Legally, it was my money too. Ethically, I was protecting myself from someone who saw me as a financial opportunity. Then I called our credit card company and froze our joint cards. Just temporarily, I told them. Just until I could sort out some identity theft concerns. 2 hours later, I got a very different kind of message from Marcus. What the hell did you do to our accounts? This is theft. I'm at Target and my card got declined. I smiled for the first time since Saturday. Let him figure out how to buy whatever he was buying with his own money. But Wednesday brought news that wiped the smile right off my face. I was going through our insurance paperwork, trying to untangle our policies, when I found something that made my hands shake. A life insurance policy. On me. For $500,000. Taken out 3 years ago, with Marcus as the sole beneficiary. I called the insurance company immediately, my voice surprisingly steady as I requested a full history of the policy. The agent was helpful, explaining that my husband had initiated the coverage, forged my signature on the application, and had been paying the premiums faithfully for 3 years. It's quite a substantial policy for someone your age, she noted cheerfully. Your husband must really love you. I hung up and stared at the paperwork. $500,000. Enough to pay off the house, buy a new car, maybe take that European vacation he'd been talking about. Enough to make a wife's accidental death during a snowstorm seem like a gift from the universe. My hands were shaking as I dialed the insurance company back. I needed to change the beneficiary immediately. And then I needed to call a lawyer. Because this wasn't just about a cruel joke anymore. This was about a man who'd been planning for my death long before that blizzard gave him an opportunity to voice his wishes out loud. 6 months later, I'm writing this story from my new apartment in Minneapolis, a bright corner unit with windows that face east toward the sunrise. I've never been happier to be alive. The divorce was finalized last month. Marcus fought everything, the asset division, the insurance policy changes, even my right to half the furniture we'd bought together. His lawyer painted me as vindictive, claiming I'd abandoned our marriage over a misunderstood conversation between brothers. But my lawyer was better. She presented the life insurance policy as evidence of premeditation, the frozen bank accounts as justified self-protection, and Marcus's text messages as proof that he felt no genuine remorse for his actions. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd probably heard every excuse for bad behavior, listened to the audio recording I'd made of his voicemails. Yes, I recorded them. All of them. Because when someone jokes about your death and then calls you dramatic for caring, you document everything. Your Honor, my lawyer said during the final hearing, Mr. Rodriguez hoped his wife would die in a car crash so he could collect insurance money. These aren't the words of a grieving husband or even an angry one. These are the words of a man who sees his wife as a financial asset. Marcus's face went white when she played the recording of his Saturday night voicemail. Caroline, you're being completely irrational. So what if I said I hoped you'd crash? It was just a joke between guys. You weren't supposed to hear it. The judge awarded me 60% of our assets, full ownership of my car, and half the house equity. Marcus got to keep the house and his pickup truck. More importantly, I got to keep my life insurance policy with myself as the beneficiary. I changed jobs too. Henderson and Associates felt too connected to my old life, too full of people who knew me as Marcus's wife. Now I work for a non-profit that helps women escape domestic violence. The pay is less, but the work feels meaningful in ways my old marketing job never did. Kevin tried to reach out once, sending a long email about how sorry he was, how they'd just been drinking and talking trash like guys do. I deleted it without responding. Some things don't deserve the dignity of a reply. Marcus remarried 6 months after our divorce was final. A woman named Brittany who works at his accounting firm. She's 26, blonde, and posts Instagram photos of their weekend trips to places we never could afford when we were married. Or maybe places he never wanted to afford with me. I hope she's happy. I genuinely do. But I also hope she knows about life insurance policies and jokes between brothers and the difference between love and financial planning. As for me, I'm learning who Caroline is when she's not trying to save a marriage that was already dead. I bought a bicycle and ride the chain of lakes every weekend. I'm taking a pottery class where my hands get dirty and my mind gets quiet. I'm dating a man named David who teaches high school history and thinks my spontaneity is charming, not exhausting. Sometimes I think about that cake, still sitting on Kevin's kitchen counter when I left. German chocolate with cream cheese frosting, Happy Birthday Marcus, written in blue script. I hope they threw it away. I hope it sat there molding for weeks, a sweet reminder of the wife who drove 9 hours through a blizzard to surprise a man who wished she was dead. But mostly, I don't think about it at all. Because I learned something important that weekend. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when someone jokes about your death, don't stick around to see if they're serious. The snow melts every spring. Marriages end. Life goes on. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it goes on better than before.